would be some benefit because I'm going to do the history thing yet again. Sarah and Jeremy just won a close game versus me and Mike. We have switched sides. We will play pickleball yet again. Our competitors are, as always, introduced. On the near side, the young lady is Sarah. I just whipped her on her forehand side with a quick little shot down the line. Her partner is Jeremy. Jeremy over there looking to his left, contemplating life, awaiting the ball return. And there you have it. On the far side, we have Mike Mondello, who's quite a fine fellow. Comes right next to me. You fine fellow. Bust a move. Hello, ATP, that I think was already out. So it's me, Brian Ridge, Mike Mondello on the far side. I am going to go finish my laundry, which means you get to listen to about Iran. If you listen to the last couple things, there's a 3-part series on a podcast. That's what you're going to be listening to. Oh, that ball wound around. I remember that shot. It looked like it was going well wide. I think he spun it. So in the air, it did the old bend it like Beckham and came back into the court. So a brilliant shot by Mike. There's 3-part series on Iran. Wiser World's the podcast. I recommend it. If you're going to travel to a country, I think it's a good thing to do. Listen to get a little understanding of the culture, what you're going to deal with, their history, and where they're coming from, and what their mixture of religious and political leanings are. And then, as we speak, we've got Israel and the U.S. and Iran and some unfun bombing and missile attacks and things like that. So learning a little bit about Israel, which actually there's a couple parts about Israel. And then this podcast that talks about Iran. I just find it kind of cool to get a deeper perspective about what's going on. There you have it. We will go into Wiser World right now.
How did Iran change under the rule of Mohammad Reza Shah? Who is Ayatollah Khomeini and how did he change Iran? What happened during the revolution in Iran in 1979 to 1980, and how did Iran become an Islamic republic? How did this change the lives of Iranians? What is the Iranian hostage crisis and how did it end? We will learn the answers to these questions and more in today's episode, part 2 of Iran 101, the last 100-ish years in Iran. Welcome to Wiser World, a podcast for busy people who need a refresher on all things world. Here we explore different regions of the globe, giving you the facts and context you need to think historically about current events. I truly believe that the more we learn about the world, the more we embrace our shared humanity. I'm your host, Ali Roper. Thanks for being here.
This is the way it feels to move through summer in Lululemon. Iconic Align softness without the front seam. For our smoothest look and feel ever, summer won't know what hit it. Stretch your limits in the non-stop flexibility of the new Lululemon Align No-Line Pant in select stores and at lululemon.com.
Welcome back for part 2. If you haven't listened to part 1 yet, it goes without saying, but you need to do that before you listen to this one. I'll be using names without explaining who they are, so that foundation is going to be very helpful. We ended part 1 with Mossadegh being arrested, the Shah being put back into power with a military leader as his prime minister. This is 1953. We're going to jump right in. Now, Mohammad Reza Shah ruled until 1979, so let's talk about him. He's a big figure in Iranian history. The Pahlavi dynasty started with his father, Reza Shah, and ended with Mohammad Reza Shah. So just those two make up the Pahlavi dynasty. And as we know from part 1, he was less ambitious from 1941 to 1953. But once he was given a second chance by this coup, he became more ambitious. He spent millions on a coronation event where he and his new wife were crowned monarchs. And he also declared, quote, that Iran was at the gates of the great civilizations, that its standard of living would soon surpass that of Europe. It would produce a way of life superior to both capitalism and communism. And indeed, within a generation, it would be the world's 5th most powerful country after the USA, Soviet Union, Japan, and China, end of quote. So he had large aspirations for Iran. And Mohammad Reza Shah, like his father, continued to focus on the military, the aristocracy, and maintaining his power through the courts. He was so into the military that he loved to read manuals that the arms dealers would give to him. By 1975, so over his entire reign, he had the 5th largest army in the world, and he became somewhat savvy in his international relations. He was able to play the game of freedom by making some concessions that really did improve the quality of life of the people, but still being able to keep his hand quite heavy. Iran became the world's 4th largest oil producer, the world's 2nd largest oil exporter. He wanted a massive and competitive state structure. He was something of a friend to the United States, as we talked about, while Saddam Hussein, next door in Iraq, received money from the Soviets, from the Soviet Union during the Cold War. The Shah was receiving funds from the United States. The United States subsidized the Pahlavi throne so long as he kept out communism and gave them a steady flow of oil. He depended on U.S. foreign aid, and he cared a lot about what the acting president in the United States thought of him. The Shah had a secret police called the Savak, S-A-V-A-K. It was essentially an intelligence agency with police powers. The stories of the Savak are pretty intense. They are known for censoring media, screening people for government jobs, hunting down, torturing dissidents in horrific ways. I don't really want to go into those ways. They were so tragic to read. What I think is critical is knowing from all the countries that we've studied so far is that if a leader wants to keep control, it has to have a brutal secret police in order to create and maintain absolute power. And this puts the Pahlavi regime and Mohammad Reza Shah in the category of a dictator. Human rights were not at the top of the Savak's list of to-dos, and when Jimmy Carter became president, he actually brought it up because the Savak was so well known for their ruthless cruelty. And one man who was living in Iran at the time said, quote, Savak has agents in the lobby of every hotel, in every government department, and in every university classroom. In the provinces, Savak runs a political intelligence gathering service, and abroad, it keeps a check on every Iranian student. Educated Iranians cannot trust anyone beyond a close circle of friends, and for them the effect is the same as if everyone else belonged. Savak intensifies this fear by giving no account of its activities. People disappear in Iran, and their disappearances go unrecorded. End of quote. So you can see how the Savak had a lot of power. And in 1963, the Shah launches a series of reforms to aggressively modernize Iran. Some say this was to actually gain favor in the eyes of the Kennedy administration. And as part of this revolution, he worked on redistributing wealth, rapid growth of cities, breaking down the feudal old customs of Iran. And keep in mind that this was not in line with the traditional religious leaders in Islam, and we'll talk about that in a minute. He instituted major land reform. Before then, Iran had this old system with sharecroppers growing land owned by an aristocracy or the wealthy. And from his reforms, more than 50% of those sharecroppers became landowners. This created its own problems, but it did weaken the noble class. He nationalized forests, he privatized industry, he allowed women to vote. He was on a mission to become a world competitor, and one of those ways was reforming laws actually around marriage, divorce, custody, polygamy. The economy grew, Iranians became wealthier, and the literacy rate more than doubled. More people were going to school than ever before in Iran, and he kind of established Iran as a major geopolitical power in the Middle East. Did it work for everyone? No. The changes were uneven, they were imperfect, but there was, I think it's important to know there was a general improvement in material standard of living and in the lives of women in terms of divorce, custody, marriage, tended to go more in favor of women than past regimes had done. And the new educated middle class expanded, and there were more entrepreneurs and engineers and managers, and older professions like lawyers and doctors and teachers also became more popular. Not all was well and good, though. The gap between the rich and the poor was still very wide. Inflation was rampant at first. The infrastructure was not fully prepared for all this modernization. So from the mid-1960s on, politics in Iran revolved completely around the will of the Shah. And using his Savak, Iran became something of a military state. The government had a lot of employees. The Shah exerted a lot of power over the economy. This is authoritarianism. You force the people to rely on you for the little things in life, right? Beehives are set up, animals are fed, crops are fertilized, carpets are woven, goods and babies are born, all under the intervention of the government. So this centralization caused some of Iran's ancient heritage to be stomped out. Yes, nomadic and minority populations dropped, but also, things improved in other ways as well. So again, it's really complicated, very nuanced. Mohammad Reza Shah's major critics were the Islamic clergy. In the religion of Islam, we have the Sunni and Shia sects, which we talked about in part 1. Both groups use the same terms in terms of lingo and language in Islam, but they use them in different ways. So Iran, which is unique to Shia Islam, there is a hierarchy in leaders in the faith in Shia Islam. The top leader is called the Grand Ayatollah, and the term Ayatollah is basically a title of high honor. There's the Grand Ayatollah, and then there are kind of regular Ayatollahs below him. Currently there are over 80 in the world. So if you hear Ayatollah, we're talking a very high-ranking person in Shia Islam. And then we have mullahs. In Iran, this is a title for a member of the clergy or a leader of a mosque, which is where Muslims go to worship. They're typically well-educated in Islamic theology and Sharia law, which we'll talk about in a second. Kind of like a teacher or a leader who knows their scriptures really well. That's a mullah. So let's talk about Sharia law, because this is going to play in big time. Okay, the holy book of scripture in Islam is called the Quran. And the Quran is believed to be the works and sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, the founder of Islam. But this book was written a long time ago, and so religious leaders and scholars after the Prophet Muhammad had to kind of give guidance or rulings on things that weren't covered by the Quran. So Sharia is a code of ethical conduct of sorts that Muslims are supposed to adhere to. It's Islamic law, like the rules of the religion. It can affect all parts of life, like how you dress, give to the poor, legal issues, crime. What I think is most critical for people to understand is that Sharia law is interpreted differently in different places. It looks different depending on where you are in the world. And the ayatollahs and mullahs of Shia Islam in Iran interpret Sharia law in a different way than other places in the world. So with this foundation, now we know a little bit about the Islamic clergy at the time. They're not super happy with Mohammad Reza Shah. We know what an ayatollah is, we know what a mullah is. This is all going to come into play. Let's go back to Mohammad Reza Shah. He is more of a secularist, more pro-Western. Girls can wear miniskirts if they want to. Education's more secular, not religious. Education is run by the state. He's not going to see eye to eye with many of the traditionalist ayatollahs and mullahs in the mosques, right? So he had enemies, and many were very powerful religious ayatollahs and mullahs, and the most outspoken clergyman by far was a man named Ruhollah Khomeini. Because I'm terrible at the I'm just going to call him Khomeini, but his name starts with a K, but it's a silent K. Khomeini came from a long line of religious leaders. His family were descendants of the Prophet Muhammad. He was quite educated, and in many ways he was unique because he studied mysticism and philosophy, and one of the ideas he really took to heart young was to explain religious things so that ordinary people could understand. And he was made an Ayatollah, so again, a great honor, in 1961 at the age of 59, and right about that time he becomes extremely outspoken against the Shah. He was pretty savvy about the way he talked about political things. He spoke out against government corruption, was very upset at some of the changes that the Shah was making. And in 1963, this Ayatollah Khomeini led 3 days of riots, and a few hundred people were killed by the Savak. In a speech, he verbally attacked the Shah in a very personal way, which got him exiled in 1964. I find this very interesting, that instead of him being taken to prison or killed by the Savak, which was not unheard of at the time, he was exiled. And he actually became more popular in his exile. He was exiled to Turkey, then Iraq, and then his last time was in Paris. Now, I'm going to come back to him in a second, because he does come back and he leads a revolution that changes Iran forever. But let's talk about what Iran looked like in
Oh my word, is that the end of the game?
to build the
I'm
scene for a
literally
revolution
just
that
walking
Khomeini
back in.
basically leads.
Perfect time.